The night I realized I'd become paperwork. The walls in our Salem house were thin, thin enough for my parents' voices to slip through like smoke. "You can take Logan," Dad said. "I'll keep Daisy," Mom answered. Then silence. And the sentence that split my world in half: "Let the court decide, Rory." I stood there holding a half-finished silver cat mask, its wet paper dripping between my fingers as rain started tapping the window. That mask melted hours later, but its ghost followed me through foster homes, false smiles, and a secret file signed by the wrong man. What they didn't know was, the cracks they made would turn to silver. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like the extra piece no one knew what to do with. Because this story isn't just about being left behind. It's about what happens when the one they forgot learns how to rebuild herself. I grew up in a house that smelled like sawdust and antiseptic, my dad's woodshop, and my mom's hospital shifts, bleeding together under one roof. Our place on Essex Street in Salem wasn't big, but it was enough. 2 stories, faded green siding, a porch that groaned when you stepped on it. Dad's tools clanked in the garage at all hours, and Mom's scrubs always hung by the back door, smelling like bleach and burnt coffee. When I was little, I used to think those scents meant love, work, and care mingled together in the air. I didn't realize until later that they were just the smells of exhaustion. Dad, Mark Bennett, was a man who built things: tables, cabinets, excuses. His hands were rough, calloused from years of sanding and shaping wood. Sometimes, when I watched him plane a board, I wondered how he could make something so smooth when he carried so many splinters inside him. He could be funny when he tried, especially when the Red Sox lost. But after the recession hit, jobs got scarce, and so did his laughter. He started bringing home beer more often than lumber. Mom, Teresa Teshall, was an ER nurse. She moved fast, talked fast, thought fast until she didn't. When her patients ran out, it was like a switch flipping. "Don't make this harder than it already is," she'd say when I asked why she and Dad fought so much. I never knew what this was: life, money, love, me. My older brother Logan was everything Dad wanted to be. Quarterback, perfect jawline, loud laugh that filled every room. Teachers adored him, coaches worshipped him, and Mom said he had a good head on his shoulders. I had a good head too, just quieter. My little sister Daisy was the sunbeam of the family. At 9, she had this laugh that made you forgive the world. She drew flowers on everything: napkins, receipts, her own skin. Me? I was the one with glue on my fingers and newsprint stuck to my palms. Paper mache was my language when words didn't fit. I loved the way torn paper could become something whole again if you were patient, if you layered it just right. I made animals, mostly foxes, birds, cats. Each one started fragile and messy but dried into something strong. Looking back, it feels poetic. I was literally practicing how to survive. Every Halloween, I made masks for the neighborhood kids. Logan called it weird art crap, but Mom said it kept me busy. That year, I'd been working on a black cat with silver-lined eyes, mysterious, a little sad. I remember sitting at my desk, hands sticky with paste, when the first argument started downstairs. Their voices were sharp, slicing through the floorboards. "You never show up, Mark," Mom hissed. "And you never stop working long enough to look at me," Dad snapped back. Then came a quieter tone, deadlier. "We'll figure it out after Halloween." That phrase haunted me. After Halloween. As if everything would break the moment the candy wrappers hit the trash. At school, I tried to pretend nothing was wrong. I drew in the margins of my math tests, little faces peeking out from the corners. My art teacher, Mrs. Lang, once said, "You see things differently, Rory. That's a gift." I didn't know what to do with a gift no one in my family wanted. There were small moments that should have told me what was coming. Like the night Mom served dinner and accidentally made enough for 3, not 4. Logan teased, "Guess Rory's invisible tonight." Everyone laughed, even me. But it stuck. Or that time Dad forgot to pick me up from art club because he was fixing the fence at our neighbor's house for cash. I waited an hour in the cold until Mrs. Lang drove me home. When I got there, the lights were off, the door locked. I sat on the porch with my backpack as rain started to fall. I should have been angry, but I just felt expected. Like this was the version of me they knew, someone easy to forget. I didn't know it back then, but that pattern, being overlooked, left behind, would matter later. It was the foundation of everything that came next. On the night Everything shattered. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. The house was too small to hide secrets. I was in the hallway, holding my unfinished mask, when I heard Dad's voice through the door steady, calm, like he was discussing lumber measurements. "You can take Logan," he said. "I'll keep Daisy." Mom's reply came softer, cracked at the edges. "And Rory?" A pause. Then, "Let the court decide." The words hit me harder than any shout could have. It wasn't anger, it was the absence of it. The finality. My hands trembled. The mask drooped. One of its paper ears tore under the wet glue. I didn't cry. I just stared at it, the ruined cat face melting in my hands, and thought, even this mask looks sad for me. That was the night the Bennett family stopped pretending. When I fell asleep, the air smelled like wet paste and thunder. I dreamed of a courtroom filled with masks instead of people, each one silver-eyed and silent, waiting for someone to claim me. I didn't know it then, but the next morning, the court really would. The courtroom smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink, dry, sterile, nothing like home. The ceiling lights hummed above my head, buzzing like trapped flies. I sat at the long wooden table with my hands twisted in my lap, watching adults decide what to do with me as if I were a misplaced suitcase. Dad sat on the left, suit wrinkled, tie too short. Mom sat on the right, hair pulled back so tight, it made her look like someone else. Between them was space physical, brutal space that said everything words couldn't. The judge read from a file thicker than my math textbook. "Neither parent has presented a sufficient care plan for the minor, Aurora Bennett." The words sounded rehearsed, like something she'd said 100 times before. I looked at Mom. She stared at the floor. Dad checked his phone. I was the only one looking up. When the judge asked if I wanted to say something, I heard my voice before I realized I'd spoken. "I just want to be somewhere someone actually wants me." A silence spread through the room, heavy and final. The gavel hit the block once, a sound like a door slamming. Temporary custody to the Department of Children and Families. That's how I met Ana Morales, the DCF worker assigned to me. She had kind eyes, brown hair pulled into a bun, and a clipboard that never left her hands. Her voice was calm in a way that made me believe she'd seen worse. "You'll be okay, Rory," she said. "We'll find somewhere safe." Safe was such a strange word. It didn't sound like home. Back at the house, Mom packed my things into a tote bag: 3 shirts, 2 jeans, sketchbook, toothbrush. She didn't hug me. She just said, "You'll be fine." Dad didn't even come out of the garage. The smell of sawdust followed me down the driveway like a ghost. It was raining again. I carried my half-finished cat mask in my arms, but somewhere between the porch and Anna's car, the rain melted the paper. The silver paint bled down the face like tears. By the time I sat in the back seat, half of it was gone. My first foster home was the Whitmans, a tan house in Lynn with too many rules and not enough warmth. Mr. Whitman worked construction and talked about discipline like it was a religion. Mrs. Whitman smiled, too much tight, polite smiles that didn't reach her eyes. "No doors closed, Rory," she said during my first tour of the house. "We like transparency here." There were 3 other foster kids and 2 of their own. I shared a room with Lacey, a quiet 10-year-old who cried into her pillow every night but never made a sound. I learned quickly to stay invisible. Cole, their 17-year-old son, was the opposite of invisible. He found my sketchbook 2 weeks in. "What's this?" he laughed, flipping through my drawings: faces, animals, masks. "You planning to hide behind one of these?" "Give it back," I said, reaching for it. He held it higher, grinning. "Touch me again. I'll tell Dad you hit me." He didn't have to. Later that night, DCF got a call. Aggressive behavior. Anna showed up the next morning, disappointment and sympathy mixed in her eyes. "Sometimes the first placement isn't the right fit," she said softly. I didn't bother unpacking at the next house. The Harper's home in Peabody was an old Victorian with peeling wallpaper and cold floors. They took in 5 foster kids at once, which meant I was just a number, not a name. Dinner was served on paper plates to save dishes. Mrs. Harper collected our allowance envelopes in a labeled tin. "Miss Curfew, lose half," she'd remind us, her smile too precise. I spent most nights awake, working quietly at the desk by my bunk. I found old cereal boxes and scraps of newspaper in the trash and used flour from the kitchen to make paste. I'd build tiny masks: foxes, birds, a small cat with one silver eye. I wiped up every drop of glue so no one could accuse me of making a mess. Art was the only space I controlled. One afternoon, Anna visited for a routine check. She noticed the tiny masks lined along my windowsill. "You still making them?" she said, a small smile tugging her lips. Then, lowering her voice, "You know, I used to be a foster kid too." I blinked. "You?" "Yep. Took me a while to stop feeling like baggage. But I learned something you can rebuild, piece by piece, even from scraps." She reached into her bag and handed me a small wooden carving knife. "For trimming edges, and for cutting loose what doesn't fit anymore." That night, I slept with it under my pillow, like a secret promise. Weeks turned into months. Winter came, hard ice crusted on the inside of our windows, breath visible in the mornings. I called Mom once from the payphone at school. The line went straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice sounded cheerful, almost unfamiliar. "Leave a message after the tone." I didn't. Spring brought another transfer, the Parkers in Salem. Pre-adoptive placement, Anna called it. The words felt dangerous, like hope disguised as paperwork. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the wind chime on the porch, soft and low, the sound of calm. The house smelled like cinnamon and paint. Nora Parker opened the door, hands stained with blue watercolor. "You must be Rory," she said, eyes bright. "Come in, sweetheart. We've been waiting for you." Her husband, Dr. Ethan Parker, looked like the kind of man who kept promises, tired eyes, but kind. Their son Miles, home from college for the weekend, barely looked up from his phone. I couldn't blame him. Strangers were his normal too. That first night, Nora brought me hot chocolate, not the instant kind, but thick, rich, with cinnamon. "I heard you make masks," she said. "We've got a whole art studio downstairs. You'll have to show me sometime." I smiled for the first time in months. Downstairs, in the basement studio, the smell of flour paste hit me like memory. Jars of paint lined the shelves, light spilling from a single window. Nora handed me a bowl and a stack of newspaper. "Whenever you're ready," she said. My hands trembled as I dipped the paper into the paste. Layer by layer, the pieces formed a face familiar yet new. I rebuilt my ruined cat mask, but this time I didn't hide the tear. I painted over it in silver. A line that shimmered like a scar turned beautiful. I didn't know it then, but that mask would become the beginning of everything that saved me. For a while, the Parker's house felt like a dream I wasn't supposed to touch. Everything was warm, the yellow light in the kitchen, the cinnamon smell that clung to the air, even the creak of the wooden stairs. But dreams, like paper, are fragile. They start to wrinkle under the smallest weight. At first, I didn't know how to fit. I hovered between rooms, too polite, too quiet. Nora would call, "Dinner, Rory," and I'd hesitate at the top of the stairs, afraid she might realize she'd said my name by mistake. Ethan tried small talk over spaghetti, asking about school, friends, homework. I nodded, gave half answers, because full ones felt too heavy. Miles, their son, came home some weekends from college. He wasn't cruel, just distant, the kind of polite that means I don't know what to do with you. Once, I caught him staring at the old family photos in the hallway, him between Nora and Ethan, grinning, perfect symmetry, and then his eyes flicked to me, like comparing a before and after. He looked away first. Still, Nora never made me feel like a guest. She'd leave art books on my bed, little notes in the margins. "Page 45 reminds me of your silver line." I spent hours in her basement studio. The world outside could crumble, but down there, under the hum of the dehumidifier and the soft clinking of jars, I could breathe. When I brought home my report card, A's and 1B in math, Ethan put it on the fridge. "You're doing great, kiddo." That word, kiddo, I hadn't heard it in months. It hit deeper than I expected. But that same night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Mom." The text was short. "Hope you're doing okay. We're moving to Marblehead. Daisy's starting ballet. Maybe next year we can visit." No punctuation, no love, Mom. Just information, clean, sterile, like a hospital discharge note. I wanted to throw my phone. Instead, I deleted the message and went downstairs. I poured myself into another mask, pressing paper so hard the paste oozed between my fingers. Nora came down quietly, set a mug of tea beside me. "Bad day?" I didn't look up. "Just another one." She didn't ask more. She just said, "Keep building, Rory. Paper remembers the shape of every hand that touched it. Make it remember yours." 2 weeks later, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice familiar and foreign all at once. "Big news. I'm getting married." I waited. "To Rebecca Lane, you'd like her. She's got twin girls. Cute as buttons." He laughed, expecting me to laugh too. I didn't. "Anyway," he went on, "we're keeping things small. Just family." "So, not me," I said flatly. He paused. "Rebecca thinks adding another teen right now might confuse the girls. You understand, right?" "I do," I said. And I did completely. I understood that family meant everyone but me. After we hung up, I went upstairs and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked different, older, harder. That night I dreamed I was back in court, surrounded by paper masks again. But this time they had my parents' voices. "We'll figure it out after Halloween." Spring came with slow warmth and faster heartbreak. I'd been living with the Parkers for 6 months when Nora told me about the upcoming home evaluation, one of the final steps before adoption approval. I should have felt excited, but all I felt was panic. What if I ruined it? What if they changed their minds? That anxiety showed up everywhere in my drawings, my voice, my sleep. I started checking my phone for texts from Mom that never came, rereading the old one until the screen dimmed. I hated that I still needed her to want me. Then, one afternoon, Anna stopped by for her routine check. She brought coffee for Nora and hot chocolate for me. We sat in the kitchen, sun pouring through the window. She reviewed her notes, then closed the folder. "You're doing well here, Rory. Really well." I shrugged. "For now." Anna's eyes softened. "You're allowed to trust it, you know." "Trust what?" "Good things." That night, I tried. I really did. I sat on the porch, listening to the wind chimes. For a moment, I thought maybe I was healing. Then another letter came. It was from Mom again, handwritten this time. She said she'd remarried. David Collins. "Things are good," she wrote. "We're adjusting to a new family dynamic. Maybe next year we can have you over." I folded the letter carefully, slid it into a drawer, and locked it. It was late October again, almost Halloween. I could smell rain in the air, the same kind of cold that had melted my first mask. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night before everything broke open again. The morning after that letter, I woke up to the sound of the wind chimes tapping against each other like tiny bones. The sky over Salem was the color of wet ash. I went downstairs, expecting Nora's usual greeting, her humming over a skillet. The smell of cinnamon and paint, but the house was quiet. She was in the basement, I realized, and followed the faint sound of a radio playing jazz. She was at her easel, painting a girl in silver and blue, her face half hidden behind a mask. "Morning, sweetheart," she said without turning. "I thought you might like to help me glaze this later." I nodded, forcing a smile. I didn't tell her about the letter. Some things were too heavy to hand to people who'd finally given you light. Over the next few weeks, I started slipping into old habits, apologizing for small things, waiting for doors to close. I'd catch myself listening for arguments that never came. The silence at the Parkers' house wasn't suffocating. It was steady. But I didn't know what to do with steadiness. It made me restless, suspicious. At school, I started hearing whispers, typical foster kid gossip. "She's that one from DCF. Her real parents dumped her." Someone even asked if my new mom got paid to keep me. I laughed it off, but it stuck like a burr under my skin. That weekend, I stayed late in the studio, working on a new mask of Fox this time. Clever-eyed, half gold, half silver. Miles came downstairs, still in his hoodie, holding a mug of coffee. He leaned against the doorframe, watching. "You never stop, huh?" he said. "It's the only thing that doesn't ask questions." He smirked. "Fair. So, you and my mom are doing art marathons now?" I froze. "If that's a problem." He shook his head. "Nah. It's just weird having someone else here again. Not bad weird. Just new." That was the first real conversation we had. A week later, Miles surprised me by asking if I wanted to go with him to pick pumpkins for the Halloween block party. I said yes. The drive was awkward but kind. He told me about college stress, about how people assumed he had it all together because of his parents. "Sometimes it's hard being the perfect kid in a perfect family," he said, smirking. Try being the extra kid in someone else's. I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me, really looked, and nodded. Guess we're both misplaced. Huh? When we got home, Nora teased us about the giant, misshapen pumpkin we picked. Perfect, she said, smiling. Beautifully imperfect. That night, I went upstairs and opened the drawer with Mom's letter. I read it again and again until the words blurred. Maybe next year. They'd all said that next year. After Halloween, someday. I realized they were never talking about time. They were talking about distance. 2 days before Halloween, Anna stopped by for another evaluation. Her tone was different this time. Nervous. Almost hesitant. Rory, there's something you should know, she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. Your Aunt Claire filed for kinship care last year. Her application was delayed. Delayed? It got misplaced in the hospital's internal mail. The form had to be signed by the department manager before it could reach us. She paused. The signature on that form was David Collins. David Collins' mom's new husband. I felt the air drain from the room. So you're saying? I'm saying if that form hadn't been held up 5 days, you might have gone to your aunt instead of the system. She looked angry, but not surprised. I don't think it was intentional, Rory. Bureaucracy eats people alive all the time. Still, you deserve better. I stared at the silver fox mask drying on the table. I guess that's what happens when you're paperwork. After she left, I went for a walk. The wind was sharp, cold enough to sting. Salem's streets were already strung with orange lights and fake cobwebs. The town smelled like caramel and wood smoke. I passed by my old house without meaning to. Someone new lived there now. Jack-o'-lanterns glowing in the windows. Laughter spilling out. Through the glass, I saw a little girl dancing in a witch costume. For a second, I thought it was Daisy. I stood there too long, until the porch light flicked on. When I got home, Nora was waiting at the table. 2 mugs of cocoa cooling between us. You were gone a while, she said gently. I went back there. I whispered. The old house. She didn't ask which one. She just reached across the table and took my hand. Sometimes we have to see the ghosts to make sure they're real. But don't let them keep you. I wanted to tell her everything, the letter, the delayed file, the ache that never seemed to fade, but the words tangled in my throat. So I just nodded. That night, I lay awake listening to the rain. I thought about Daisy and Logan, about whether they remembered me. I thought about my parents and how both had built new families like I'd never existed. And I thought about Anna's words, you can rebuild, piece by piece, even from scraps. Downstairs, the wind chimes sang softly. Somewhere between those notes, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait to be chosen anymore. If family was something you could build, then I'd build mine layer by layer, like the masks I made. I didn't know that in less than 24 hours, on Halloween night, the Parkers would make their own choice, one that would finally give me back my name. Halloween came wrapped in the kind of mist that makes Salem look half real, half memory. The streets glowed orange from jack-o'-lanterns, and the air smelled like cider and rain. At the Parkers' house, the porch light burned soft gold, the wind chimes whispering above the door. Inside, laughter echoed, neighbors, kids, paper ghosts hanging from the ceiling. Nora had turned the living room into a little carnival. Bowls of candy, fake cobwebs, a face-painting station by the window. I sat there with a brush in my hand, painting butterflies and zombies on kids' cheeks. My silver mask, a new one I'd made the night before, rested on the table beside me, gleaming under the string lights. Half witch, half cat, its crack sealed with a thin vein of silver leaf. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that first one, ruined in the rain, and the girl who had stood crying under that same October sky. Nora floated between the guests, her apron streaked with orange paint. Ethan handed out cider, smiling like a man who finally had everything he'd prayed for but didn't dare say aloud. Miles helped with decorations, occasionally glancing my way, offering small smirks like we shared some secret rhythm. The evening passed in a blur of laughter and sugar. I didn't realize how late it had gotten until the last kid left, their faces glowing under the porch light. Nora locked the door and turned off the porch bulb. The house fell quiet. Just us now, Ethan, Nora, Miles, and me. Rory, Ethan said, his voice softer than usual. Could you come into the living room for a second? Something in his tone made my stomach flutter. I wiped my hands on a towel and followed them. The candles flickered, and the faint smell of pumpkin spice hung in the air. Miles was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, the screen glowing. Nora patted the seat beside her. "Sit, sweetheart." I did, heart thudding. Miles cleared his throat. "Okay, so, I figured we should all be here for this." He turned his phone toward me. On the screen, Ana Morales smiled, sitting in what looked like her office. "Hi, Rory," she said, her voice coming through the speaker. "Happy Halloween." I blinked. "What's going on?" Nora reached for Ethan's hand, squeezing. "We wanted to do this together with everyone present." Ethan's voice wavered. "We've already spoken with DCF and the court. If you're willing, we'd like to adopt you. Officially." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt, the sound of the rain outside muffled, my pulse in my ears. I stared at them, at their faces lit by candlelight, waiting for the words to dissolve like one of my masks in water. But they didn't. Miles set his phone down, eyes steady on me. "We talked about it for weeks. I wanted to make sure you were okay with it too. I think we'd make a pretty good family, if you're up for that." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. You want me?" Nora's eyes glistened. "Sweetheart, we already do. But we wanted you to choose too. You've had too many decisions made for you." Tears blurred my vision. "Why me?" I whispered. Ethan leaned forward, his voice breaking just slightly. "Because when you came here, the house stopped echoing. Because you make broken things beautiful again. Because we want to be the people who stay." The air cracked inside me. Every defense, every wall I'd built to survive those years in silence, it all broke. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. Not the quiet tears of the foster system, the ones you swallow so no one hears, but loud, messy, human crying. Nora pulled me into her arms. I felt the warmth of her sweater, the cinnamon smell in her hair, the steady beat of her heart. She didn't hush me. She just held on until the shaking stopped. When I finally looked up, Ethan was smiling, tears shining in his eyes. Miles reached out a hand, awkward but sincere. I took it. His fingers squeezed mine. Anna's voice came through the phone again. "It's okay to say no, Rory. You've earned that right. But if you say yes, this family's ready to make it official." I wiped my cheeks, breathing hard. My voice came out small, but steady. "Yes, I want this. I want you." The room fell into a silence so full it hummed. Nora exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Ethan laughed, a sound halfway between relief and joy. Miles leaned back and said, "Finally," like he'd been waiting for this ending too. Outside, thunder rolled far off, familiar, not frightening, the kind that feels like change, not danger. I glanced at the silver mask on the table, its crack gleaming under the candlelight. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine just like this family. Nora reached over and lifted it gently. "You should hang this somewhere it can catch the light," she said. "I already know where," I whispered. Later, after the call ended and the others went upstairs, I stayed in the studio alone. I hung the mask on the wall beside Nora's paintings, right at eye level. Through the small window, I could see the reflection of the porch light flickering in the rain. For the first time in years, Halloween didn't feel like an anniversary of loss. It felt like the night I came home. In the weeks after Halloween, everything blurred into motion: court appointments, forms, background checks. But for once, the paperwork wasn't about where to send me next. It was about keeping me. Anna handled most of it, her calm voice a compass through the bureaucratic maze. One afternoon, while she reviewed my file at the dining table, she paused. "You should know something, Rory," she said. "Your Aunt Claire, she really did try to take you in." I looked up. "You told me it got delayed." Anna nodded. "I finally traced it. The form sat for 5 days in the internal mailroom at North Shore Hospital before DCF received it. The last signature on the document belonged to David Collins, my mother's new husband. For a long moment, I just stared at the paper in her hands. The ink had smudged near the signature line. Someone must have signed in a hurry. He was the one who delayed it? Anna sighed. "It's impossible to prove intent. Bureaucracy is a convenient villain. But sometimes, people don't have to tear something down to ruin it. They just have to look away long enough." That night, I sat alone in the studio, tracing the silver seam on my mask. I thought about David, about my mother's letter, about my father's phone call. Maybe they hadn't meant to break me, but they had left me in the rain, expecting me to dry myself. And I had. Revenge didn't look like shouting or lawsuits. It looked like success they could never claim credit for. It looked like paper souls. The art program Nora helped me start that spring, teaching kids to build masks from recycled scraps. It looked like the first time one of them, a shy 8-year-old girl, said, "I didn't think I could make something beautiful." I smiled and told her, "Neither did I," until someone showed me how. Sometimes, revenge is quiet. It's the sound of laughter in a home built from other people's leftovers. It's the light catching the silver cracks on a wall full of masks. I hung my newest one beside the rest, a fox with eyes sharp as mirrors. Beneath it, I painted 4 words in small silver letters. Paper doesn't break easy. They thought they had discarded me. What they didn't know was that every fracture they caused had turned to silver, and I'd learned how to make it shine. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like the extra piece that never fit, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Because sometimes, the people who break us are the ones who teach us how to rebuild. I was once the kid no one chose, the name left to a court file. Now, I build stories out of scars, and every mask I make carries a piece of that truth. So if you've ever been written off, stay tuned. This story isn't over, and neither is yours.